Maria Island, often referred to as Florida's Shangri-La by the sea. For pictures depicting the island's early days, we are indebted to many longtime residents whose knowledge of Anna Maria goes back into what latecomers think of as antiquity. For this beautiful scene of Anna Maria Island today, and particularly for the portraits of island residents, we are grateful to Mr. Archie McFadden, island dweller for many years and a photographer par excellence. According to Florida historians, the earliest known inhabitants of Anna Maria Island were Indians of the Timucuan tribe, a sun-worshipping branch of the Seminoles who later came down from Georgia. The Timucuans were said to be a peaceful tribe, tall and handsome, and of an artistic nature. Their presence on the island was attested many years ago by the discovery of their burial mounds filled with artifacts of their culture. Anna Maria Island first came to the notice of the so-called civilized world in the early 1500s, when Spanish explorers swept into this area. Among the first of these explorers was Ponce de Leon, who, in 1529, made his second expedition to Florida. Ponce de Leon attempted to settle at the mouth of the Manatee River, but in a fierce battle with the Indians, the colorful explorer was mortally wounded and was taken to Havana, where he died. It was in this area, too, that Hernando de Soto is said to have made his first landfall on the American continent in 1539. According to historians, de Soto put into what is now Longboat Key to fill his water cask, then rounded Anna Maria's North Point and sailed into the Manatee River, thus launching his historic expedition to the Mississippi. For more than 300 years, Anna Maria went unnoticed except by a few sport fishermen who found its waters teeming with fish of all varieties. One of these sportsmen was George Emerson Dean, a Yankee world rover from Maine, who paid for his rovings by lecturing on the Chautauqua Circuit. It was during a fishing trip to this area that he caught his first glimpse of Anna Maria. He exclaimed, "This is it. My next and last home will be built here." And from that day he roamed no more. Under the Homestead Act, George Bean acquired a large tract of land comprising the entire North Point, now named Bean's Point in his honor. He moved his family into a tent on the beach while he built a rough cabin just opposite the location of the present rod and reel pier. Except for its wide sandy beaches, Anna Maria Island then was a virgin jungle of mangroves, palmettos, sea grapes, and sand spurs. Its only inhabitants were deer, rabbits, rattlesnakes, a few wildcats, panthers, huge sea turtles, and alligators, and wheeling overhead were great flocks of seagulls, pelicans, songbirds of many varieties, and such other seabirds as herons, cranes, terns, cormorants, and their feathered kin. Moved by the sight of all this exotic beauty, Bean one day was so struck by the poetic mood that he delivered himself of this ode to his island. "Oh, my home by the sea, where the wild winds blow free, I gaze with delight at the beautiful sight as I sit in my cabin door." But George Bean had little time to sit in his cabin door. There was not only the backbreaking job of clearing away jungle growth for his house and garden, but there was a need to help settle new homesteaders who followed him to the island. Among these early newcomers was Sam Cobb, his wife, and his brother, Ruick, who took up a homestead in the island center where a natural bayou afforded a safe harbor for small boats. The Cobbs became boat builders, establishing the first business venture on the island. Here Sam Cobb's wife, a true pioneer woman, is caught in a candid view of her going about the daily chores of keeping house in the island wilderness. A daughter of the Cobb, suitably named Anna Maria after the island, was the first white child born here. Now living in Bradenton, Anna Maria riles as one of the best-informed historians of the island. Following the Cobb, other newcomers drifted in, forming a polyglot community that included a talented musician, a fishing family from the Canary Islands, a pharmacist, and a retired railroad conductor. Joining the varied community, too, was a noted naturalist, Asa Pillsbury, the only man known to have lived on Passage Key, sometimes called Bird Island. Pillsbury's appointment as warden of the bird sanctuary came directly from President Theodore Roosevelt. The little island off Anna Maria's North Point has alternately appeared and disappeared, but it still holds its fascination for shellers and bird life fanciers. Incidentally, one of Pillsbury's nephews, Clyde Phelps, a pioneer naturalist in his own right, has done more to beautify Anna Maria Island than any other one man. But to get back for a moment to the island's first settler, it was in 1898 that George Bean was overtaken with a serious illness that forced him to go to Tampa for treatment. The illness proved to be terminal, but before he died, he sent for his daughter Mary and her husband Wilbur Hall to come down from Ohio to live on the island long enough to prove up his homestead claim. They came for a year and stayed for 8. During this period, 4 of the Hall's 5 children were born. A 6th died in infancy and became the only person known to be buried on the island. With a natural green thumb, Wilbur Hall turned Bean Point into lush garden plots, while Mary turned their home into a come-one, come-all refuge for boat parties caught in sudden storms. Wilbur provided a living for his growing family by peddling produce from his gardens to the military post on Egmont Key. For supplies, he had to sail his frail craft, often through squalls and heavy seas, to Cortez or Bradenton. Now and then, when fog swept in, blotting out the sight of his small dock, he had to tie up overnight at channel buoys. Common enough for Wilbur, such adventures were nightmares for Mary. It was George Bean's son, Will, then postmaster at Tampa, who dreamed of turning Anna Maria Island into a popular vacation resort. In 1912, he was joined by Charles Martin Rosa, millionaire inventor of the Fig Newton, in forming the Anna Maria Beach Company. Pooling their money and energy, mostly Rosa's money and Will Bean's energy, they laid out streets and sidewalks, installed a freshwater system, and erected model homes. One of the first buildings was a church, Rosa Memorial, erected by Charles Rosa in memory of his parents. The little church still stands at the center of a handsome new complex. Chief pillar of the little church for many years was Mrs. Lulu Coleman, eldest daughter of the island's founder. In good times and bad, it was she more than any other who kept religious services going, engaging visiting preachers, playing the organ, rounding up kids for her Sunday school. Though somewhat overwhelmed by the new Rosa Church sanctuary, the little church still faithfully serves, now as a special chapel. To attract excursion boats, then flying Tampa Bay, the creators of Anna Maria's new day built a long, deep-water pier where the present city pier now stands. Island old-timers still remember with nostalgia the excitement as such vessels as these, the SS Favorite and the SS Manatee, nosed up to the new docks to disgorge big crowds of pleasure seekers. Soon Anna Maria was outstripping all other Tampa Bay stops in numbers of excursionists. Many came just for the day, streaming across the island down Spring Avenue, loaded with lunch baskets and bathing paraphernalia, and heading for the Gulf beaches. Directly on the beach, Rosa and Bean had constructed a sprawling pavilion with bathhouses, refreshment stands, and a dining room looking out toward the flaming sunset. If one's inclination didn't lean toward lunch baskets or sunsets, he could spend his time ogling the lady bathers, all daringly swaddled in that airish version of the bikini. Or, if all other activity dulled, one could always persuade a lovely companion to take a reflective stroll along Anna Maria's glittering beaches away from the curious crowds. By the early 1920s, it became plain that a bridge connecting the island with the mainland was a must. Since the water span between Anna Maria and the fishing village of Cortez was the shortest, the bridge was put there. Tested for strength by this tired old mule and other vehicles, the bridge, rattly but strong, was dedicated with great fanfare in June 1922 and immediately spurred the growth of Bradenton Beach. When, a half-dozen years ago, the old Cortez Bridge had about shivered its last timbers, a new one took its place, though the old bridge's remains are still there, as seen in this aerial view. Along with new construction brought by the bridge to Bradenton Beach, a handsome two-story pavilion was erected at the Gulf end of Bridge Street. The pavilion quickly became the island's social center. Unfortunately, this structure, like the one built at the island's north end, was destroyed by fire, then was rebuilt, only to be burned down again a few years later. Besides the old church, another of the island's earliest structures, one that has survived storms, fire, and the batterings of exuberant youths, is the old schoolhouse on Magnolia Avenue. Added to and refurbished many times, it now serves as Anna Maria's Youth Center. Providing education for the island's increasing population of school-age youngsters early became a goal challenging the island's pioneers. Among the concerned was Mrs. Lillian Davis, wife of Anna Maria's first mayor. Another tireless crusader for what educators call the glory of the lighted mind was Mrs. Lena Phelps, who threw her inexhaustible energies into developing the island's school system. She later became principal of the present elementary school in Holmes Beach. Another community facility that was shuttled about from place to place before settling into a permanent home of its own was the island's post office. Here is a painting of one of the post office's temporary locations, this one in a corner of a home on the approximate site of Anna Maria City's present facility. Adding color to postal delivery for many years was a character named Harry Ditmas, who preferred to be called Uncle Sam. A former stage director in New York, Ditmas knew the value of costuming to dramatize the action. He suitably dressed both himself and his truck to fit his Uncle Sam role. During the turbulent 20s came the wild Florida boom, followed a few years later by the Great Depression. Faith in Florida sank among islanders as among other Floridians. Yet there were those who stubbornly held to their belief in the island's future. Among the believers was Jack Holmes. It was Holmes and his sons who developed the island's midsection into what later became the city of Holmes Beach. Among others who contributed color as well as solid character to the island's overall growth was the late Mitch Davis, a builder not only in wood and stone, but also in confidence in the island he loved. Mitch became the first mayor of the city of Anna Maria and the island's #1 citizen. Samples of others who left an indelible mark on the island were these: Mrs. Halsey Tishner, wife of the first mayor of Holmes Beach. Tirelessly active in all community affairs, she and her husband established the first large restaurant on the beach, the Gulf Terrace, whose popularity in its time was like that of the present-day Pete Renard. Then there were the Blackburns. Hartley Blackburn was county superintendent of education for 24 years, while his wife, Betty, taught in the old Anna Maria School and at the same time organized and promoted more environmental and nature organizations than can be enumerated. Another who left his mark on the island was Father Benjamin, a retired Episcopal priest known for years as the best-loved man on the island. He organized and headed a whole slew of community activities, among them the Anna Maria Power Squadron and the Island Garden Club. A worthy successor to Father Benjamin as the island's best-loved citizen was Bill Sutton, whose bright personality and involvement in every good cause were lost to the island by his recent death. No roster of those who have made Anna Maria Island the dream place it is today would be complete without tribute to a big Minnesotan named Peter Michelson, creator of Key Royale. For years, most builders' attention had been focused in the island's Gulf front. Few paid any heed to a small, jungle-grown and mosquito-infested island off Anna Maria's bay side, then known as School Key. Here's how it looked a few years ago, and here's how it looks today after transformation by the late Peter Michelson and his associates into Key Royale. Similar transformations have likewise occurred all up and down Anna Maria Island. Beautiful Florida-style homes, many of them on canals dug from marshlands, formerly the abode only of fiddler crabs, have gone up magically. Fine restaurants, luxury motels, and other rental units abound. Large marinas serve the many boating enthusiasts, and additional bridges to the mainland have made access easier. All in all, there has blossomed on Anna Maria what islanders like to call a controlled boom, which means that both residents and city fathers are determined, despite pressures from outside, to keep the island's quiet charm uncontaminated by reckless overgrowth. Changed though the island may be, its glorious beaches are largely the same today as when George Emerson Bean first saw them. Tides, storms, and even the skirts of an occasional hurricane come and go, changing Anna Maria's configuration here and there, but by and large, its seductive appeal remains. Putting that special appeal into verse, Anna Maria's own poet laureate, Marion Coleman, granddaughter of the island's founder, has put it this way. There's an island in the Southland with a magnet at its heart, and it pulls you with a power that would tear your soul apart. Perhaps you found it paradise, or only passing fair, but wherever you may wander, you'll wish that you were there. The rustling palm trees beckon, and the miles of silver sand, 1,000 wonders of the deep, and the treasures of the land. So wherever you may wander, just relax your grasp and start to be drawn back to the island with a magnet at its heart. And so we come to the close of our little journey into Anna Maria Island's past and present, meeting along the way some of those who have made it what it is. And maybe, just maybe, you too may catch the pull of that magnet that has drawn us to this Shangri-La by the sea.